Welcome to Public Health America. I'm your host, Dr. William Latimer. Here on Public Health America, we speak with experts from an array of specialties across the liberal arts and health professions to provide you with not only the best science, but practical tips to live a healthier life. We also celebrate what studies have long documented, namely the unparalleled value of a liberal arts college education by setting the stage to pursue a career of your choice, increase lifetime earnings, and engage in civil debate. Our experts will share decisions they made and support they received that helped them to beat the odds. By sharing one or two life lessons, their stories may provide you with the inspiration and method to realize your dreams. This is Public Health America. Welcome to Public Health America. I'm your host, Dr. William Latimer. Today, it is such a pleasure and a privilege to have a very special guest with us today, Representative Rabb. Rep Rabb, it's great to have you on the show.
Good to be on.
Thanks so much. So why don't we just start with, tell us a little bit about the district that you oversee. What neighborhoods, towns, et cetera, are in it? Tell us just a little bit about your region.
Sure. Well, as a state representative, I represent roughly 68,000 people. My district is within the confines of Philadelphia, so I represent 4 neighborhoods in Northwest Philadelphia, including Chestnut Hill, Mount Airy, Bluebell Hill, and West Oak Lane. And I serve for two-year terms.
2-year terms. And how many, what term are you on at this point? How long have you been serving in your role as representative?
I'm in my 4th term, and I serve in the majority in the House of Representatives as a Democratic elected official. My first 3 terms, I was in the minority, and we are the largest full-time state legislature in the country.
Great. Fantastic. Well, it's so wonderful to have you. I mean, look, let us live in interesting times. Certainly you are. I know you're working on a number of initiatives, and certainly you and your office have been great friends to Chestnut Hill College, which we deeply appreciate. But tell us a little bit about some of the things you're leading these days.
Yeah, that is no small task. I am a fairly prolific legislator, so over the course of over 7 years, I've introduced over 100 bills and resolutions. The through line with my policy work is really justice. So it could be gender justice, racial justice, economic justice, environmental justice, etc. So that's really what grounds me in my service. But in terms of my agenda is overwhelmingly influenced by the House Democratic leadership. They decide what bills run, and hopefully some of my bills will be running so that they can be enacted into law if they get through the Senate. But I know the show is about public health, and so many things to me should be public health considerations that are often put in other domains. So gun violence is out of control, and this country leads the world in terms of gun violence and homicides by gun. That should be a public health crisis consideration. So that is something I'm very much concerned about. I'm also interested in climate action and the impact of the climate crisis on all of us. That too is a public health consideration. So those are 2 of many different things that come to mind.
Sure. And, and certainly gun violence is close to home. Climate control is global. Walk us through, we have a wide array of viewers, both in the Bronx, New York City, and Philadelphia. But walk us through, why don't you select a recent bill, either one you're working on or one that passed, that is, sort of near and dear to your heart, and walk us through the process and or, the goal
if it's something you're working on?
Sure. So let's go with climate action. I have a number of bills. And the other thing to note about Pennsylvania is it is a net exporter of energy, most notably fracked gas,
Yep.
which is connected to a lot of rare cancers. The environmental impact is extraordinarily awful. And so there's a lot of discussion about fracking in a state that embraces it because it creates jobs, it creates a lot of revenue, but not nearly as many jobs as in the renewable energy space. That said, we need to make sure that corporations who have a significant carbon footprint, that the information, that the activities that they may have on public health are made transparent, and that they are held to account if there are chemicals that have leaked into our streams and our rivers and our soil. That's important. So I have a bill that would focus on making some of those documents transparent that otherwise are not disclosed to the general public, even those impacted communities. So if you look at the derailment that happened in East Palatine and right across the border of Pennsylvania and Ohio, the residents were not given information about the nature of the spill and how awful it was. We deserve to have that information be disseminated in a timely fashion.
So the importance of transparency, and part of your work as a legislator is making sure that folks with that high carbon footprint, as you say, are articulating to the public what they're doing. Let's talk about renewable energy. What sort of initiatives are you leading there?
Well, probably my most popular bill is my bill to move Pennsylvania to 100% renewable energy by 2050. All the technology, even under the Trump administration's Department of Energy, said that we can get 95% there with existing technology. But you have to have the right incentives for generations. The fossil fuel industry has been subsidized by taxpayer dollars. If we subsidize renewable energy like we do with fossil fuels, we can expedite that transition to a clean energy future. And we should, not just for public health reasons, but just in terms of competitive reasons. The fact that we can have more energy that's homegrown, that's clean and renewable is very important, and the creation of family sustaining jobs. Now, there's a lot of talk in some corners that fracking creates good jobs, but if the workers are dying, they're getting injured doing very challenging work and exposure to a lot of radioactive materials, it's not really a family sustaining job.
And when we talk about renewable, so are we talking solar? Are we talking, like, give us a rundown of your top 3 to 5 renewable energies that'll get us to 95 to 100% by 2050?
Sure. Now, the reality is this has to be a global effort, but we can start at home. And if we consider home Pennsylvania, then what we're doing is we're decommissioning nuclear power plants at the appropriate time and replacing them with renewable energy sources. So that would largely be wind and to some extent solar. Pennsylvania, every state is different. It has a different kind of energy profile in terms of what are the best sources of clean energy for that state. So if you're in the Midwest, that's called Wind Alley. So from Minnesota all the way down pretty much the heartland of our country, that's when you have the best wind. There are places in Pennsylvania as well. Solar is you got the Sun Belt, the deep south and out to the west and all of California. So it really depends on the state. But in Pennsylvania, the ones that we're focusing on most are wind, solar, and we also should be looking at geothermal. Geothermal is the sleeping giant of all of them, because right under the crust of Earth, no matter where you are, it's always 54 degrees. And so being able to tap into that cool air and heat and cool our buildings, and we have a very old infrastructure in Philadelphia. So that could be particularly powerful. And the technology used for geothermal is very similar to fracking. So you can employ the same people who might be laid off in the fracking field and bring them on the geothermal. And that's a very powerful example of something that's not politicized. Geothermal is not a right or left issue. Solar and wind have become politicized, but the beauty of geothermal is it could be particularly meaningful in energy communities where you have coal mines, coal-fired plants that have been shut down or will shut down, nuclear power plants, because they're on the grid, they're hubs, energy hubs, they can be connected to any geothermal projects that are viable in their backyards. And that's also important for job creation in rural Pennsylvania because there's so few opportunities for living wage jobs to be created beyond prisons. And well, I don't even know if Walmart provides a living wage, but those are two of the biggest employers in rural communities, and they need more options.
So glad to hear that geothermal has yet to become politicized. Hopefully it will not. What is needed to sort of move that needle? You had alluded earlier to the fact that, historically, traditional sources of energy have been funded by taxpayer dollars. Like, what's it going to take to really launch geothermal in terms of whatever infrastructure would be needed to get it off the ground?
Sure, great question. So it's really simple. When you have a geothermal project in the backyard of someone who does not believe in climate change, you don't need to believe in climate change to see the value of geothermal. So if someone has a state senator, state rep, has a geothermal project in their backyard, not of their doing, it just so happens in their backyard, and they see the extraordinary amount of energy that can be created, or how it can be used to heat and cool facilities. It could be schools, it could be rec centers, libraries, you name it, government facilities, and they see how extraordinarily powerful it is, then they'll be on board. So seeing is believing. I have found in my experience in the legislature that when you let people see what it is, not just talk about it, not just listen to the experts, but actually see it in progress, that changes hearts and minds.
With a little bit time left in our first half of this segment, you had mentioned, so you represent Mount Airy, parts of Chestnut Hill. What were the other two?
Bluebell Hill and West Oak Lane.
Got it. So a lot of variability there, right? Sociodemographically and otherwise. It's obviously an incredibly rich area, rich history, amazing people. Talk about one initiative that you're excited about in terms of just the sort of hometown.
Sure. So there is, for years, there has been a movement to connect the suburbs to Philadelphia, particularly my district, and then to Center City, which is what we call downtown. And then from downtown out west all the way to Valley Forge, which goes, I think, like 40 miles, walking, biking, etc., hiking. So it's the Gresham Trail. It is a large-scale greenway project that will connect suburban and urban, and also kind of expand the footprint of the Wissahickon. So if you look at the park system in Philadelphia, if it were contiguous, it would be larger than Central Park, right, in terms of acreage. So we're really talking about an opportunity to have folks who are coming from working class and lower middle class, largely Black neighborhoods, and connecting them to nature and to the park system, and also allow suburbanites who are right across the street to tap into that as well. So a greater diversity of Philadelphians and Pennsylvanians more broadly, and others can see the benefit of the urban wild, right? So we're not talking about wildness in terms of violence. We're talking about nature and the benefit of having nature so close to urban centers. It's very rare, and it's it's one of the things I love about my district. It is very green, but the greenness correlates with socioeconomics. So the poorer or blacker the neighborhood, the less of a foliage canopy there is. And so this would be a way to connect not just across geography, but also across social class and race, which is important because a lot of the outdoors activities and resources tend to go to more privileged communities. And this is a way to cross those unnecessary boundaries.
We're going to go to a quick break. When we come back, Representative Rabb will tell us a little bit about his background and educational history that led him on a path to the career that he has today. This is Public Health America. I'm your host, Dr. William Latimer. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Public Health America. I'm your host, Dr. William Latimer. So, Representative Rabb, we always start this part of the program with the same question. Tell us where you were born and a little bit about your formative experiences.
Sure. So I call myself a Chidelphian. I was born and raised in Chicago, and I've adopted Philadelphia as my home. I've been here 22 years, but yes, I'm a Chicagoan born and bred, and I went to a Jesuit high school, which was an interesting experience for me. It was very disciplined environment, as you can imagine, very rigorous academically, and it did prepare me for college and for life more broadly. And so I was very interested in going away, leaving the Midwest, and probably leaving my parents in the dust. And so I was looking at different schools far from Chicago, and I had visited the campus of Yale College and was very, very impressed and had a really amazing time there and knew others who went there. And it was something my grandma really wanted me to apply to because her father, who grew up in Connecticut, had always wanted to go to Yale, but there were not a lot of Black people accepted at Yale up until the 60s. So I applied, I got in early, and it was a very intense 4 years.
Where did you, so when you were at Yale, what was your journey like at the beginning? What was the first year like? How did you select a major? How did you navigate?
Yeah, well, I was very active my freshman year in every way except academically. So I was involved in campus politics. It was towards the end of the divestment movement from South Africa. So I was involved with that. I was doing community service. New Haven, Connecticut is a very Black town with a lot of poverty. And I volunteered there. I also worked on a campaign for the first Black mayor, a gentleman who became the first Black mayor of New Haven. I also was very entrepreneurial. And so I started a business selling T-shirts and so forth. And I also did comedy. I did improv comedy. I was trained in high school at Second City. And I also did stand-up comedy as well. So I was doing all those things except going to class. And then Yale said, we're not sure we're going to let you back sophomore year. We're going to see what you do over the summer because your grades are awful. And, you know, there are plenty of people who want to be here. And we're not so sure this is a good fit if you don't get your act together. And that was a real wake-up call to me. I was so enamored with being away from home and being independent and being able to do all these wonderful things that's part of college life. It's not just the classroom, but you got to start with the books and you got to end with the books. And so I got my act together over the summer, came back, had my best year and continued on. And then I ultimately majored in African Americans studies with a concentration in history. I was one of those students who could do pretty well. I mean, I did well enough to get into Yale, but I was not one of those students who would excel at any and every subject matter because I had undiagnosed ADHD. I call that neurospiciness. And I had no idea how much of a challenge it was to me because I did not know what ADHD was. It was not a term that was used in the 80s, as far as I recall anyway. And so I did not know how to study. I did not know how to take notes particularly well. I had a really difficult time processing how to be a student in college. And so as a result, I faltered a bit until I figured out my way. And one of the ways I did it was I wanted to study something that meant a lot to me. And I wouldn't be where I am today if it weren't for the Black history that my family helped create over generations and centuries in this country.
Sure. And you sort of have anticipated and partially answered my next question, which is, as you improved your navigation of the academic side of the house of Yale, which obviously is a private elite college that is going to be highly competitive. One answer was you found something that you were passionate about, and that immediacy was helpful. Were there any other things that assisted you during that period?
Yeah, I think I had to realize I had to reprioritize, right? I mean, and this is just true of life, right? There are many things that you may be interested in. There's many things that you want to have an impact on. But first things first, and I was a student, which meant that I had to excel academically, and there are certain things you have to do. How you tie that to other things is a secondary question, but you got to lead with the books, and also you have to know how and where to ask for help, right? If you have too much pride to say, oh well, I always did well in high school or middle school or whatever, and now I'm struggling, I'm stupid. No, if you internalize that, you become your own worst enemy. And I knew we all have a genius in our own ways, right? How do we bring that to bear, and how do we engage other people to help us stay on the straight and narrow? So being able to have a good kind of confab of folks to hold you up was definitely helpful.
That's great. So what was you graduated from Yale. What's your next step?
I moved to Brazil.
Mm.
I lived in Brazil for 6 months. I studied in undergrad. I did a Afro-Brazilian martial art called capoeira that New York actually made famous in the United States in the 70s when capoeiristas came from Brazil and extended the reach of capoeira to the United States and beyond. So Brazil has such a deep, I have such a deep connection to the country and the culture and the history. I wanted to study the language, so I learned Portuguese, and I wanted to travel in a country and immerse myself in that country, in their culture, and understand all those things. And so I did that for 6 months, and I knew that I would never have another opportunity to do it. I didn't have a car note, I didn't have a house, I didn't have a wife, I didn't have kids, I didn't have any of those things. I said, this is the time. So I saved up my money, and I lived abroad for 6 months, and it was a life-changing experience. I still remain in contact with folks who I met there when I was 22 years old. And travel is an extraordinary way to expand your mind, your networks, your knowledge base. And then I moved back to the States, and I worked in Washington, D.C. for my U.S. Senator, Carol Mosley Braun, as an very entry-level worker. And it was an amazing experience to see how government works on the federal level.
Sure. I mean, again, two extraordinary stories. I think the notion of international travel by U.S. standards and going to a place like Brazil and immersing yourself for 6 months is transformational, life-changing. From your report, I certainly can endorse that from similar experiences. And then come back, start as a entry-level person, but with a great legislator in D.C. How long did you work with her, and what was that experience like?
I worked for her for 17 months, and it seems so short, and it was in some ways, but a lot was packed into that 17 months before I was tapped to work for the White House Conference on Small Business, because business and entrepreneurship, particularly socially responsible business, has been near and dear to my heart for decades. And so I got my first entree into that world working for a nonpartisan federal commission after I worked in the US Senate. So I got a lot of different experiences and traveled domestically to states I'd never visited, Oklahoma and Missouri and places I'd never visited before, and engaging along a wide array of folks over that course of time.
That's great. So as we wind down, we reach quite a lot of folks and young people in the Bronx, in New York City, and Philadelphia, and maybe some of them are on the fence about whether or not to attend college as the next step, particularly these days when everyone or many people are talking about the value proposition of an undergrad degree. What would your advice be to folks about whether or not, young people particularly, about whether or not they should attend college?
Sure. I think there are many different viable paths for young people, not all of which include a 4-year college education, a bachelor's degree. But I think there are a lot of people who may not think that college is right for them, but it very well could be. There are so many good colleges and universities in the United States in particular for folks to choose from. There's no one right place for any one person. I could have done well at any number of colleges. I might have even done better at other colleges. But open your mind to the possibility. Just because no one in your family has gone or none of your friends have gone to college does not mean that it's not a right fit for you. But what you want to do is ask questions of people who are in college, who've gone to college. What have they learned? Visit colleges, because no matter where you are, there's a bunch of colleges near you. Get a sense of what it is, not from what you hear on TV or on social media, but by actually experiencing it, by going to those campuses, maybe sitting in some classes and such. But that's what I recommend. Also, that the job of college is to open your mind and to provide critical and creative thinking skills, right? These are things that are super important in life. And it's not just about your major. My major was African-American studies. He said, how do you use that? Well, I learned how to think critically. And that was the most important thing. No one asked me what my major is. It's so very rare at 54 years old. That's what school you went to, what are you doing now, but rarely the major. It's really the experience. It's the networks, it's the knowledge, it's the skills, it's the perspective, all of those things. And so for folks who are considering it but maybe a little intimidated, visit, ask questions, get around, see if that may be for you, because college is an extraordinary thing for a lot of people. It's not for everyone, but don't rule yourself out until you've dug around a little bit and had some firsthand experiences visiting campuses and talking to people.
Great guidance. Thank you so much. I want to thank Representative Chris Rabb for sharing his experiences and also talking about the exceptional work that he's doing here in Philadelphia, Mount Airy, Chestnut Hill. I want to thank our viewers for tuning in. This is Public Health America. I'm your host, Dr. William Latimer. Until next time, take care.